for the nice introduction. And thank you very much, Prof. Atharge, as well, for inviting me for this great initiative that SLIT is doing. I think it is very valuable for junior academic staff and also the students to get a good hands-on knowledge on research, right? So I know that there are students participating from many different faculties in today's session. So there will be, I will not specifically going into computing examples. So I will try to discuss this particular research onion model, which is proposed by Saunders et al. With much more general way, right? So generally, I take 5 to 6 hours for this particular lecture. It is a long lecture that we will discuss many practical examples and use cases taken from research, previous research, and as well as some day-to-day incidents, right? However, we do not have enough time. So what I will do is like within next 50 minutes or 45 minutes, I will try to go through, do a cut down version of that particular lecture. So you guys can get some kind of introduction about this research onion model. So why we need this kind of research onion model, or why we need to have a extensive knowledge on the research methods and techniques that we are using during our research. So basically, when yourself or even some other people who see your research, right, they can only see this methods or techniques used in your research. However, it is only at the tip of the iceberg. So if you think of the methodology theory, philosophical foundations, all of these things are hidden under this, under what we can see, right? Therefore, sometimes students and junior academics find it difficult to identify what kind of research method that I should use, and then what kind of research design I should use, what are the data collection techniques or analysis techniques that I should use, right? So these kind of issues comes into their mind. If you do not have good experiences in conducting few research, after that, actually it is becoming easier because you know already what kind of techniques and what kind of designs you should use. However, this Mark Saunders, Philip Lewis, and Adrian Thornhill, they proposed research onion model that helps us to identify what are the crucial decisions we need to take when we try to do a research. So what they have done is they have modeled the various techniques and designs, right? Various decisions that we need to take during a research into different layers using a layered model. So this is like that in the network communication, we know that the 7-layer architecture or 4-layer architecture, right? Like that, they have come up with these 6 layers. So using these 6 layers, we can make decisions. For example, assume that if you know that your research philosophy, and then you can make a decision whether you want to do what kind of theory development, whether you are making a theory or whether you are proving a theory. And you think that you should do a quantitative research or qualitative research or mixed method research, right? And then the next layer, you can decide whether you need to do a survey, right, or a case study, etc. And then whether you do what kind of data collection with that, whether you need to do a cross-sectional data collection or longitudinal data collection, and what kind of data collection and analysis techniques you need to use. So like that, each layer you can make decisions, right? Probably from each layer, you will be selecting one choice, or you can select more choices as well. We will discuss about that later. For example, positivism deduction, and then you can go for monomethod quantitative, and maybe you will collect data using a survey, and your survey can be cross-sectional because you will do it in a limited time. And then your data analysis techniques, whether you will be doing some kind of summary statistics, whether you will do some kind of um, correlation analysis, right? Even if you go beyond that, right? So these kind of decisions you can make. On the other hand, if you think about, let's say, pragmatism kind of research, where you will you will develop something, right? Um, so in that case, probably we'll go for abduction methodology or deduction again, right? And then you can use you can use mixed method, and then you can use design science research kind of thing. It is not shown here, but you can use design science research strategy, and then you can again go for cross-sectional, and so like this you can take decisions, or if necessary you can do a longitudinal data collection as well. So what we are going to do in this lecture is we will go through each and every layer and try to understand what are these things. Then it becomes easier for you to understand. So it will be easier for you to peel the different layers of this research onion model. And time to time, I will bring in some interesting examples for you to understand these things better. So before we moving into research philosophies, we need to think about, or we need to learn about um, the philosophical foundations. There are three philosophical foundations that we discuss. One is called as axiology, another one is called as ontology, and another one is called as epistemology. When we get these different stances of this epistemology, ontology, and axiology, we can define something called as research philosophy. So then let's first understand what is this axiology, ontology, and epistemology. So I will start from axiology first. Axiology is about values such as good and bad, right? Every action that you do, even a research you do, it has some good aspects and bad aspects. It can be morally correct or it can be immoral. If you think about the development of atomic bomb, right, during the Second World War time, so whether it is moral decision or whether it is moral research or immoral research, some people can say it is immoral because it kills thousands of people. You cannot select targeted people to kill, right? Instead, you will destroy whole civilization. On the other hand, people also say, thanks to the atomic bomb, the Second World War stopped. Otherwise, we would have lost few millions of lives, few more millions of lives. So we can talk both ways, right? When we conduct a research, we need to, based on our ethical principles, we need to do research which do more good things than the bad things, right? So axiology is about identifying the values of what we are doing. And then what is ontology? Ontology is about what exists and what is not exist, right? I will talk about ontology a little bit more in a later slide. Therefore, I will not going to discuss examples here. And the other one is, third one is epistemology. Epistemology means concerns with knowledge. So in epistemology, we will discuss how we can establish knowledge. Again, I will provide you more examples later. So basically, axiology is quite simple, right? So it is the perspective of doing something good or bad. So when you are conducting a research, you need to basically select a research topic which does good things or which is morally correct. Otherwise, it goes more along with the ethics, research ethics. So, but ontology and epistemology is quite complex. Each has three different perspectives. Based on these different perspectives, we can define different research philosophies. For example, in ontology, there are three beliefs. In one belief, we call as singularity. So it says there is only one universal truth for a problem. For example, if I give you a number series and I ask you to calculate the average, right? Or standard deviation, there is one single answer to that problem, right? So we have this kind of problems. We have this kind of research problems in our life where you have only one correct answer for that problem. Also, so there are certain problems that we can define different realities. For example, if you think about to improve the ethnic harmony in Sri Lanka, right? Different ethnicities, so different person have different viewpoints. For example, like let's assume that if you go and ask from a single person how we can improve ethnic harmony in Sri Lanka, he has some ideas for that. If you go and talk to a Muslim person, he will tell you he will tell you different opinions, right? So different, each and every person is a different person. He has a different way of looking at the world. So these many realities. So therefore there can be many correct answers for a problem. If you talk about how to how to reduce the poverty in Sri Lanka, right? Based on different persons, the way that we help for a particular person, it can be different. For example, certain people, if the government give some kind of short-term money plan, then they can do a business and they can come out of the poverty. And maybe another person, it will not work. Certain people, you need to tell them or you need to teach them money management, right? So that can become an answer. So like that, there can be many realities for a problem. And there are another set of problems. There can be one or many realities for a problem. So, which means sometimes we feel if we look at in an objective manner, we can see only one answer. But if we think about subjective way, probably there are many different answers. Assume that you create a new user interface for one of your system, let's say your library management system. So we can measure things like quantitative measures we can do. We can see, okay, how efficient this thing works. So you do a nice user study, you collect quantitative data, and then you identify how fast a person can search and book a particular book title, right? And then that is a quantitative measure. That is a objective measure. But if you think about different aspects, like how can a disabled person use this kind of UI? How can a elderly person, let's say a person who do not have good eye vision, can use this kind of system? Then you can think of different realities for these kind of different people, right? So then the third belief is there can be one or many realities for that problem. And if we think about the philosophical foundation of epistemology, it is about how we define new knowledge. Every research that we do, right, we generate new knowledge to the world. Because the research word itself, the meaning is we are doing something new, right? Something new or something we try to do better than what previous people have done. That's how the research enterprise works, right? And if you think about the knowledge that generates by research, some type of knowledge can be directly measured. If you think about collecting quantitative data and analyze that, right? You can measure. If you develop a new machine learning algorithm to solve some kind of problem, do predictions, right? So then the accuracy of that algorithm can be measured. Certain knowledge that we gather in research can be interpreted. For example, if you want to come up with a theory of a process, how we can, for example, how we can make slit masters level courses, right? Uh, like much more better, right? So there are no quantitative answers for this, right? So it is about, we are talking about quality, and then there's no proper correct answer. From collecting data, we need to interpret certain processes, right? So those processes are the interpreted knowledge. The next one is knowledge can be measured and interpreted. Certain problems, there can be some things can be measured and some things needs to be interpreted. So these are the basis of epistemology. Then we will go into this first layer of the research onion model, where we will talk about research philosophies. Remember that I told you these research philosophies are coming or derived using these three philosophical foundations: axiology, epistemology, and ontology, right? So we discussed about this, what are these three philosophical foundations. Now we will discuss about few different philosophies and try to understand what are these things. Sorry that I could not go very in detail to discuss about what is realism, what is positivism today, but I will give you at least one example for each and every of these. So in realism, it is about what I see is the reality, right? So if you see something, then realist believes that it is correct, right? So it is independent of your mind, but using observations, you understand the world, right? So that is realism. And positivism. Positivism is derived from the ontological perspectives of you are believing that there is only one reality, and epistemological perspective of the knowledge can be measured using a reliable tools and designs. So then we can derive the research philosophy of positivism. So in positivism, so we derive the new knowledge from positive interpretation, which means we think that our target audience will accept the research results only as long as we can repeat those experiments that we do or that research we do, and then we can show there is a repeatability in our work, right? In other words, like we can do some kind of quantitative measures, and we can show that this works, right? For example, you develop a new algorithm and a new computing algorithm to solve a problem, and then the algorithm, how we prove an algorithm is correct. For the if you give some kind of the same input, the algorithm needs to produce same output, right? It cannot produce different output. Then that is not a proper computing algorithm. So like that, so then algorithm development can be modeled under the positivism, right? So generally in positivism, we collect quantitative data and we measure data, and by doing constant measurements, we prove our hypothesis is correct, or prove what we try to do. Our solution works, right? And then we will move into this constructivism and interpretivism. So constructivism and interpretivism are two research philosophies which goes very closer. They are derived using the same perspective. So the ontological perspective is that we believe that there are multiple realities for problem, multiple answers for problem. And the knowledge needs to be interpreted or explained using the collected data, right? So there can be many solutions for that particular problem, and the knowledge needs to be interpreted and explained. So that is called as constructivism. And also in interpretivism, there are two very small difference. I will tell you about that after the next slide. So in the interpretivism, while the positivism previously accepts only one reality, right? And focus only on one possible description or explanation. The interpretivist, on the other hand, accepts that research result is to understand and interpret according to a specific context. From context to context, it will be different, right? So, for example, if you want to, for example, like there is one thing that when we talk about the conflicts in Sri Lanka, religion conflicts or ethnic conflicts, right? That's why people, so especially social scientists, tells you that, okay, by giving like 13 amendments to like giving some more power to uh, uh, like east and uh, north of the country, right? And so can solve the problem, right? On the other hand, people at south can become suspicious because they will think, okay, why north and east needs to give certain more decision making power, right? But if we think from the interpretivism angle, right, from that research perspective, then we can say everybody is not same. So that when we think about the context of a people who lives in north or who lives in east, they have different problems. So therefore, people who living in those areas needs to have some kind of decision making power. On the other hand, people who are living in the western part, and the people who are living in south has different problems. So they also need to have their own decision making power. That's why the administration, the government administration is usually divided into different zones, right? Because then these governments believes those smaller units can address the problems on these zones in a much better way, right? So whether we need 13th Amendment or fully scale 13th Amendment or another different solution is a political answer, right? So political answer where every Sri Lankan and different religions with different politicians needs to discuss and solve that problem. However, the idea is when you have different types of people, right? Then it is much more, we can find answers for problems in a much more positive way if you can divide the larger community into groups and try to get the answers from those groups. So I previously told you that interpretivism and constructivism is two different things. How they different? So for example, interpretivism, we go deep down and we try to understand why something is happening. And on the other hand, constructivism is like more observation around, observation based on more observations. And then based on the occurrences, we decide whether something is, we take a decision based on the observations. So I will tell you a small example. Assume that during your childhood, you get into the bus, right? When you sit on a bus seat, you saw that a pregnant mother get on board the bus. people wake up and giving their seats for her, right? You try to um, study or try to understand why this thing happens, right? So you talk to people and you ask your mother, you ask your father, you ask some other people. When a pregnant mother comes in, why we need to give the seat? Probably your mother or father tells because she's in a special condition and it can be harmful for the baby or it can be harmful for the mother as well. Therefore, we should give the seat to her. And maybe another person in the bus can tell, I'm a young person, so I'm scared if I do not give the seat to this pregnant mother, the surrounded people will start criticizing me, right? I'm not giving the seat. So then that is his own interpretation, right? So by gathering all these viewpoints and identifying why we should give the seat for this lady, pregnant lady, is um, is what we doing under the interpretivism, right? On the constructivism, we are more doing observations. So so for period of time, you will do observations. When a pregnant person comes get into the bus, everybody giving away the seats. So then one day, when I grow up, I should also do the same, right? So then that is more a constructivism-based solution. Then we will move into pragmatism. This is also beautiful research philosophy. So under the pragmatism, we believe that reality can be one and many, right? Because if we think on an objective way, there can be single solution. Subjective way, there can be many solutions. When you conduct a research, there are several research questions. Certain research questions can be answered with um, with objective way, right? So there will be one reality. And certain things you need to identify. For example, if you do a usability, sorry, assume that you develop some kind of artifact, you develop some kind of solution. And that solution, if you want to measure accuracy, if you want to do benchmarking, then you feel that related to those things, it is a single reality or single solution. But if you think about usability of different groups, user groups, then there can be many realities, right? So these kind of research can be modeled under the pragmatism. So then the knowledge can be measured as well as interpreted. So in pragmatism, we are free to select the philosophy and methodology according to our research questions. Generally, graduate students and fourth year students, you guys know that you can have more than one research questions in a research in your research, right? So certain research questions will be, you will use quantitative methods, and certain research questions you will use qualitative methods. Then you are doing a pragmatism based research. So this is a summary of what we have talked. So if you have ontological stance, singular reality, and epistemological stance is knowledge measured by specific tools and measurements, then you are doing a positivism kind of research. Constructivism or interpretivism, you examine the knowledge using interpretive approach, and there will be multiple realities, multiple solutions for a problem. And ontological stance, singular and multiple. If you examine the research questions using best tool, this goes under the pragmatism. And here you can see the methodologies, research strategies that you can see. So the positivism usually goes along nicely with surveys, experiments, and statistical analysis. Interpretivism goes with field studies, case studies, hermeneutics, phenomenology kind of research. Pragmatism goes with mixed method research, action research, design science research. So don't worry about these methodologies for now. I will give you an introduction about each and every method later. And let me also tell you about two more research philosophies, because I think it will be quite interesting. So critical realism, right? Realists believe that what they can see, right? In critical realism, says that our real world is different than our observable world. For example, you understand the world around us using your five senses, right? You can see things, you can hear things, and then you can touch things, right? Taste or smell. So using these five senses, you understand the world. But that is something that we understand as that is only our observable world. If you think about another person, your friend, he will observe the world in a different way. If you think about a cat, right, or a fish, right, so they observe the world in a different way. So it is very difficult for us to understand the real world, but we understand the world as the is the observable. So in our observable world, things are happening, right? Things are happening. For example, suddenly there is a tsunami comes in or earthquake happens, right? So that is the observable event which generates. But that observable event that generates can be produced by unobservable structures, right? So there are unobservable things, unobservable powers or unobservable structures in the world, in that real world, which creates observable events, right? So um, that's why people have lots of doubts why this thing is happening. So if they cannot understand why it is happening, they tend to think, okay, maybe God did something, right? Maybe it happens due to karma, right? So that's where the basis of these religions comes in. So to describe us the unobservable part of the world, right? So critical realist, unobservable structures caused observable events, and the social world can be understood only if people understand the structures that generates the events. So one day, if we can understand this real world, then we will be able to scientifically explain all the events which are happening around us, right? Till that, we will not be able to understand the real world properly. On the postmodernism also, there is a very interesting aspect. Postmodernists believe that the realities are subject to change, right? With the time, we understand the world. The way that you understand the world as a uh, like child can be changed in 10 years time, right? And also your political way of thinking, right, can be changed over the years. Probably you hate one politician or one particular ideology 10 years ago, but today you really love that, right? You hate a particular political party 10 years ago, and then now you really likes them, right? So these things happens because our realities change with time to time, right? From our experiences, we change our realities. So it happens because of our experiences as well as the social constructs around us, right? So things which society ask us to believe, right, or encourage us to believe. For example, like uh, if you, I mean, when you are as a Sri Lankan, you think some kind of uh, like doing something is wrong, right? Or immoral. But if you go to a different country, it is not immoral, right? Or it is not wrong, right? So like that, time to time, we can change. So, for example, like this underage marriage, if you think about 2000 years ago, that was quite normal. But today, it can be punishable act, right? If you marry underaged person. So like that, people's thought process change time to time, right? So we have discussed this research philosophy layer. Now we will discuss about, so you can think of your research problem, what you are going to do in your research, and you can select your research philosophy. And then the next thing is, based on your research philosophy, you need to understand whether you need to do what kind of theory development, whether you are going to do a deductive research or inductive research. So this research onion model can be understood starting from outside. You can go to the inside. Also, if you have data, you can do it in opposite way as well, right? So later we will discuss the opposite way as well. One example. So uh, so we discuss about the outermost layer. Let's understand what is deductive research and inductive research. So deductive research means you come up with a hypothesis. So what is hypothesis again? Hypothesis is like you solve a problem and then you come up with a hypothesis, which means you propose something, some kind of solution. Most of the computing students use deductive reasoning for their research, probably 90%, right? 10% doing inductive reasoning. So, but social scientists, right? Natural sciences, people are doing inductive reasoning. So in deductive reasoning, let's understand what is hypothesis. Based on your theories, based on your past research results, you can say something like that. If you have a problem of X, so we can say problem X can be solved by solution. So you propose some kind of solution. It can be a new algorithm, it can be a new machine learning model, it can be some kind of nice prototype that you develop for people, right? By solution Y, right? The problem X can be solved by solution Y. So this kind of hypothesis you will come up with. And then we need to test whether that hypothesis is correct or incorrect, right? So we have to do some kind of hypothesis testing. So in order to do that, you can create, you can come up with an experiment, you can do a survey, or you can do a design science research kind of thing, right? You can develop an artifact, and you can do a test and see how users study, and now you can see whether that solution really works or not, right? So this approach is called as deductive reasoning. So you using theories and past research, you come up with a hypothesis, and then you do observations or experiments, and then you will do the confirmation whether your solution works or not. This is called as deductive reasoning. In inductive reasoning, you collect data. For example, you are solving how we can reduce the poverty in Sri Lanka, right? You collect observations or you collect data. You will interview people who are poor. You will interview people who works to fight against poverty, some NGO people, some government officials, and then you identify certain patterns with those data. And what kind of working solutions. You can build a tentative hypothesis, and later you will propose a theory or process or framework, right? So it can be a theory, process, or a framework. For example, you identify now after this post-COVID era, right? We are doing lots of remote accessing into our computing systems. So you want to come up with a new cybersecurity policy for SLIIT. So in that case, you can see observations, you can see previous incidents, right? Patterns, you come up with tentative hypothesis using thematic analysis or something, right? And then you come up with a new security framework for, or policy framework for SLIIT, right? That is an inductive research. So second layer is you identify your research is going to be an inductive research or deductive research. So this is a comparison between deductive and inductive approach, but I will not go into detail since we have a limited time. The next is about research design, right? So what we take in the research onion model, these three layers: research choices, research strategies, research horizons. When you get those three combined, we call it as research design. So these three layers, right? So research design is the plan to answer the question. So you have research questions, and then what is your plan to answer this research question? That is, so for the research questions, you can come up with research design. And each of different, which means like if you have more than one research question in your research, you can come up with 3 or 4 research designs. So research strategy is the actioning part of that plan. Whether you are doing a experiment, whether you are doing a survey, right? Whether you are doing an interview. So then that is the actioning part of the plan, right? So here you can see the research design, the layers related to research design. Assume that you want to, so let's talk about 2 examples. Turning your research questions into a project, right? Assume that you want to prove a model for a relationship in a business environment. You decide that you use a questionnaire survey, right? And then you gather quantitative data. In that case, we can go ahead with this mono method, right? So you select surveys, you will go mono method quantitative, and then your data collection. You don't have enough time, therefore you will go for cross-sectional data collection. Cross-sectional data means like you create a snapshot of a time. So you take a snapshot of the sample that you study. So which means like during a particular short period of time, you collect data from your selected participants. On the other hand, you can go for longitudinal data, which means like you select a sample and you study them for years. For example, if you want to see what are the long-term effects of a vaccine, right? Let's say COVID-19 vaccine, we need to study 10 years, within 10 years, what are the long-term effects, right? So you can select a sample of people who get a particular type of vaccine, let's say Pfizer vaccine, and then we study them for next 10 years, and then we study what kind of illnesses they get, right? So like that, this kind of study is a longitudinal study. Cross-sectional means, let's say within 1 or 2 weeks, we collect data on these people. So then when you take these 3 together, we call it as our research design. Another example, assume that the same thing, you think that you will conduct a survey, but you need to collect both quantitative data as well as qualitative data, right, to prove that, study that. So then you select the mixed method approach. And then you do not have enough time, therefore you collect data, both quantitative, qualitative, using cross-sectional time horizon, right? So this is your history combined will become your research design, right? So then let's talk about these. For example, mono method quantitative, which means you will use only quantitative um, data, right? So you will collect quantitative data. Through quantitative data, you will do some objective analysis, and then you prove something is correct or wrong. And qualitative data, so you will collect qualitative data, which, for example, like data you gather through interviews, right? Or using open-ended questions, right? So those are qualitative data. And multi-method data, for example, like you can collect quantitative data, but again, after some phases, you again collect quantitative data. So then it is a multi-method quantitative. And multi-method qualitative, you can do the same. Mixed method means you will collect both quantitative and qualitative. Then there are different designs. called multi-method simple and multi-method complex, right? So now let's discuss about this layer. What is this? What are these research strategies? Yeah, so Chulani asked a question, can I get a recording? I think it is, the session is recording. So you can ask the organizers for recording. So there are multiple research strategies, right? Starting from experiments, action research, grounded theory survey, ethnographic case study, archival research, design science research. So we will talk about each and every method in a very short time. For example, experiments, lots of students doing an experiment type of research, right? So in experiment, we come up with the hypothesis and we test whether that particular hypothesis is correct or wrong. And we conduct these experiments in a controlled environment, and we control some variables which can affect our study. When it comes to experiments, we want to talk about certain different variables, independent variables, dependent variables, mediating and moderator variables, control variables, and confounding variables. So what is independent and dependent variables? Dependent variable is the variable that we measure. Independent variable is the variable that we change. For example, if you want to study whether adding more water or adding more fertilizer can enhance the plant growth, right? So your dependent variable is the height of the plant, right? Or growth of the plant. So this is your dependent variable. If you add more water or more fertilizer, these are your independent variable. Because you can change the amount of water, amount of fertilizer that you add, and then you take the measurement. So these are the two basic type of variables in experiment research. And there is a thing called correlation versus causation. So causation means if you have a true cause and effect between two variables, then we call as it is a causation. And if you have a statistical association between two variables, we call it as correlation. And there are two other variables called mediating variable and moderator variable. Mediation variable explains the process through which two variables are related. For example, we know that for athletes or cricketers, right? If you think about our Sri Lankan fast bowlers, when they have higher workload, they tend to get more injuries. When they play more cricket matches, they tend to get more injuries. Why these injuries are happening? Because of their neuromuscular fatigue. High workload causes neuromuscular fatigue, and that causes injuries, right? So this mediation variable explains the process, why we are getting the injuries. What are moderation variables? Moderation variable is a variable that can affect the strength and the direction of a relationship. When you conduct a research, you need to understand these variables, right? So again, we know that fast bowlers gets workload, high workload, they tend to get injuries. But player to player, their fitness level is different, right? So their aerobic fitness is different. For example, if you think about a player like Chaminda Vas, Nuwan Kulasekar, these kind of fast bowlers, they had a very good aerobic fitness. Therefore, even their workload is high, right? Even their workload is high, they tend to get lower injuries. They played lots of cricket matches in their life. But if we think about certain fast bowlers, they tend to get, even though they play less amount of workload, less amount of matches, they tend to get more injuries, right? So because they have less aerobic fitness. So moderation variable is a variable who can sit in between our independent and dependent variable, and which can affect the strength and direction of the relationship. So that can affect the outcome of your research. And control variable. Control variable are the variable that usually we control in our research. For example, we want to study how the color of the light, whether the daylight light bulb or cool white light bulb produce more growth of a plant, right? So the light color is the is our independent variable, right? And the dependent variable is the plant height. That is what we measure. However, certain variables we need to control because we need to add the same amount of water, same type of soil, right? If the soil is different, then one plant will grow high. And the same amount of temperature, same amount of day-night time, right? 12 hours of light, 12 hours of dark. So like that, those are the variables that can affect our study where we need to control. And then we have confounding variables. Confounding variables are complex other variables that can influence both the cause and effect, right? For example, assume that we come up with a research question to investigate whether alcohol use has an effect with lung cancers. Right? It is not a direct relationship. This is what we do not know, right? But we want to identify. We know to test whether alcohol use can cause lung cancers. So, however, if we unmeasure the smoking, right, we know that smoking can increase alcohol use. Smoking can increase lung cancers. So it can affect both cause and the effect. So these kind of variables are we called as confounding variables, complex unmeasured third variables that can affect both cause and the effect. Right. Related to the experiments, we can have these classical experiments where you can have a control group. You select participants, let's say 500 people. If you want to test a drug, you will divide them into control group and the treatment group or experiment group, right? So the control group, you add 250, 250. So you divide them into different group and you assign these 500 people randomly, 250 each. And then we measure the dependent variable and we do the intervention. For example, we give the new drug, and the other people, we may give a fake drug. I mean, which looks like the same color, same size of the tablet, but that tablet does not contain the active ingredient. At the end, we will measure the dependent variable, and then we do a comparison between the two results of two groups, right? So, and statistically significant results yield by the experiment group, then we say our hypothesis is correct, which is the which is that new drug is effective, right? And quasi experiments are the experiments where we do not have a control group, or we are not doing a random selection of people, or we are not doing a random assignment of participants between groups. Those are called as quasi experiments. And experiments can be happen as between subject design, which means every people who participate for our study, we categorize them into different groups, right? And then they will go, like, let's say 2 subjects go through treatment 1. 2 subjects goes through the test the drug B, and then 2 subjects go through the control treatment, right? So then this is called as between subject design. And there's another experiment design called within subject design, where each and every subject will go through the control experiment, treatment A, and treatment B. Assume that you are doing you have developed few different UIs, right? And you want to compare. So you ask each subject, maybe you change the order that you present, but you ask each and every participant to try out each and every design, right? And you change the order in between. And then this is the within subject design, but you can randomize the trials, right? And another research strategy is the survey. So in the survey, it is very popular in business and marketing research, where you use the questionnaires. Basically, you collect quantitative data and you analyze the data quantitatively and come up with new findings. And archival research makes the use of administrative documents or previous documentaries, books, right? These kind of things you will refer, and then you try to answer your research questions. These are called as mostly secondary research because you are not collecting your own data. Instead, you use the data which are already collected, right? And then try to answer your research questions. So these are called as secondary research. What is primary research? Primary research means you will do a primary data collection. You will collect your own data, and then you will try to answer research questions. Case studies, usually case study is a specific study, limited study that you will study a person, a group, or place, event, organization, or phenomenon. So case studies are commonly used in social, education, clinical, and business research. So case studies, usually we use qualitative methods. For example, for case studies can be good for describing certain behaviors of people or comparing a study. Assume that some work happens in United States, you can conduct that experiment in Sri Lanka, and then you can do a cross-country comparison study. So then the case study is a very interesting method. And the students research, sometimes they add case study as a chapters in their thesis, right? In order to study how a particular thing. Assume that you previously we discussed that we can propose a framework, security framework for SLIIT. And then we implement this security policy framework for a small group in SLIIT. And then we study for a couple of weeks and see whether it is practical or not. That is a case study, right? So case studies are good thing, good addition for your research. Ethnographic research. Ethnographic research are also called as people research. So you want to immerse into a particular culture, right? A particular type of community and organization, and then you observe their behaviors and interactions, and then you come up with a written report. That is called as a ethnographic research. Assume that you want to study what are the eating habits of Vedi people, Vedi community in Sri Lanka. You can go to Dambana or any kind of this Adivasi settlement, and then you can live in their settlement for a few months or few weeks, and then you can observe their behaviors, eating habits, and then you write a report or write your findings. That is ethnographic research. And action research, another interesting research method strategy, which are based on pragmatism, where you will simultaneously taking actions and try to answer your research problem. For example, you find out in SLIIT, assume that you want to reduce the dropout rates of students, right? So student dropout rates can be caused by different factors. Maybe some students have language difficulties, some has financial difficulties, some students have some kind of, let's say, different mental conditions, right? So you can take different actions to solve these problems. For example, you can connect with them with flexible loan schemes. You can direct students who have limited language abilities. So you can introduce them to different courses, right? Courses that can enhance English communication skills, maybe mathematical skills, right? So those are different skills that different actions you can take. So like that, you take different actions and you diagnose the problem, you plan and you take an action and evaluate, right? And then you again diagnose the new state. You again taking actions, right? Like that, you will do a positive change in the organization. So you are changing the organization until you solve your problem, right? So this is called as action research. Grounded theory research. As the name suggests, grounded theory research propose a theory, right, as an outcome. So here we are building a theory. For example, previously I described how we can get rid of the poverty in Sri Lanka. So what you can do is, you can, another example, both example you can think of. Here, since it is stated, I will explain this example. Let's say you are appointed into HR department, and HR department identified that people works in your work environment is frustrated. So you want to talk to people, and you will identify what they feel as lacking. Maybe they are not happy with their administrators. Maybe recent policies they are not happy with. Maybe they are having, like, let's say, salary. They expect a salary increment because of the current economic crisis. So like that, you identify these different opinions of people, and then you come up with a theory or process. So that is the outcome of a grounded theory research. So now you can understand that grounded theory goes really nicely with the inductive type of research, right? Inductive approach. So we discussed about this layer as well. So now let's understand this time horizon. So previously so time horizon means like how you collect data. So whether you do a cross-sectional type of data collection or longitudinal type of data collection. Cross-sectional study, you will get a different sample. So your sample can have different types of people or few different samples you can select, but you will study them in one so very limited time period. In longitudinal study, you will select a sample and you will study it for like longer time, maybe 20, 30 years, right? Or few months. So longitudinal studies can go from few months to few years. Assume that you select set of kids and then you study them until they become adults. So longitudinal study and cross-sectional study comparison, you can look at in longitudinal study, you will study the same subjects, detect changes that may occur over a period of time. Here you are collecting data. Cross-sectional study, you collect data from many different individuals at a specific point in time. And you look at variables repeatedly over a period of time. Longitudinal study, you observe the same sample. You observe the change at both group and individual level, because you can look at as a group how they change, and also individual person, you can see how individually changes people. And this is very time consuming, and this is very expensive to do because you need lots of money and effort. But you can study cause and effect relationships very nicely in this. Cross-sectional studies, on the other hand, you will select a diverse example and you study a specific point in time. So particular pointing in time, look at different variables. You can observe different type of samples, maybe kids, elderly people, young people, right? This gives a snapshot of a population in a particular point in time. If you study today, right? So that is give you a snapshot of 2024. And this is not expensive. Therefore, most of the studies we can see cross-sectional studies. And mostly like if you are doing a 1-year research, right? Then you need to do a cross-section studies. But if you do a PhD, probably you can do a longitudinal study. And you cannot study cause and effect relationships very well with this study. So in that case, you have to do a longitudinal studies is the better choice. So we discuss about this. And let's quickly go through these different data collection methods. So data collection methods, previously I mentioned that there are primary data collection methods and secondary data collection. Secondary research is based on secondary data collection, which means you conduct your research, you try to answer your research questions using already available data. So if you, for example, if you do a literature review, you try to find the data that needed for your research using previously published research papers. And also if you can collect data from some government databases. If you conduct research related to SLIIT, you can get the previous meeting minutes, degree related documents such as degree bylaws, right? So like that, you can get the data. And if you want to get some demographics data of Sri Lanka, you can go for governments of census and statistics and download this data. And also using commercial databases, some available data you can download. You can write your own web scraping tools and download this secondary data, which is useful. For example, if you are doing, if you want to do social networking data, right? So you can download some, you can scrape some previous Twitter threads, right? So these are secondary data collection. And primary data collection, you will collect your own data. For example, you will conduct a survey or questionnaire. You will interview it, you will give it to a people and you will collect data. You will interview. You can do interviews. There are 3 types of interviews: structured interview, unstructured interview, and semi-structured interviews. And also you can do like this focused group interviews. So these kind of different interview methods you can use and you can collect data. So you can audio record or you can take notes. If you do audio records, you can transcribe that data and you can get the text. And you can do observations. You can use observation notes and you can observe how people react or how people work, how people collaborate together. You can conduct experiments. During your school time, you are doing the experiments, right? So you know how to conduct experiments and collect data. So these are primary data collection techniques. These are secondary data collection techniques. And data analysis techniques, you can basically follow the quantitative data. If you have quantitative data, then you can use quantitative data analysis techniques, starting from summary statistics and visualization of your data. You can do quantitative data analysis. For example, you can calculate average, standard deviation, mean, median, right? Quartiles, interquartile range. These are summary statistics. And you can do visualization. You can visualize your data using bar charts, histograms, pie charts, scatter plots, using parallel coordinates, right? If you have multidimensional data. So these are visualization tools. And also you can do much more sophisticated quantitative analysis like cluster analysis, regression analysis, Monte Carlo simulation, time series analysis, cohort analysis, right? So these kind of analysis techniques in quantitative methods. Qualitative methods is you are dealing with the textual inputs of people, dealing with people's stories, dealing with what people said about a particular thing. So you have to identify the most important input or related input from these qualitative data. In qualitative data, you will find very less amount of important data and more amount of unwanted data. So you need to use some qualitative data analysis techniques, and then you want to do a qualitative results you need to obtain. For example, thematic analysis is one of the very important techniques where you want to identify the important themes or important ideas or concepts told by people. On the other hand, you can use, for example, narrative analysis. If you are assessing a life story of a person, so you can identify, it provides a systematic way of identifying different important stories shared by that particular person, right? So like that, you can use these different analysis techniques based on your project. You can discuss it with supervisor and select a proper qualitative analysis techniques and quantitative analysis techniques. And then you can use the you can do your final results. If you think about an inductive way of research, right? You can start with data collection and analysis. So your collected data can be analyzed And if you identify, okay, this kind of analysis techniques that I will use, then you can think whether I should collect the data using cross-sectional method or longitudinal method, whether I should use mixed method or mono method, qualitative, whether I should use a survey or interview, right? Whether I am doing an inductive research, whether I am modeling my research based on interpretation. Like that, you can take different decisions in each layer. This is very helpful when you guys need to write about the research methodology section in your thesis, right? You can talk about each and every decision point that you have made in each layer, and each layer you can select few more, right? So you can select survey, or as well as you can also use things like, let's say, case study. So you can conduct an experiment, right, together. So these kind of decisions you can make, and then this provides you a very good like methodological approach, or a very good structured approach to present your research. So I hope you have received good understanding. Since we do not have enough time, I will not go into this, but assume that when you conduct a research, you need to find consistency if repeated. That is called as reliability. And the validity, which means research you need to make sure that your research measures what you actually intended to measure. So reliability and validity is an important thing. So there are some threads to read reliability. I will share this slides so you can go through these things. So in summary, what we have discussed is we need to make research choices, strategies, time horizons, right? And we need to come up with good research design. So that is exploratory, descriptive, explanatory. These are some example of research designs. You can use cross-sectional longitudinal data collections, and you can select analysis techniques. Important considerations: you need to worry about the validity and reliability of research. You need to follow ethical considerations. So that is the summary of what we have discussed. So try to understand this research onion model that can be, I hope that can be very useful for your future research. And thank you very much, guys. If you have any questions, we can answer. So over to you, Ms. Pushpamala.
Thank you, Dr. Dasun.